If you're a follower of Antonio Batista or Chivo2121, then you should consider watching this video. As a disclaimer, this segment is not about promoting racial bias, but it's to help to give awareness on an obscurity when it comes to the history of the island of Hispaniola that's divided between Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Two nations on the island that had totally differentiated historical evolutions and a social and economic conflict that is not so greatly understood. References for this segment will be provided to you in the description down below, where you can do your own reading and learn more for yourself. Before I get started, just a few things I would like to show with you guys. Recently I had purchased this book, Historical Dictionary of Haiti, and this is by Michael R. Hall. And the other one, as you already see, that I have already, by Eric Paul Roda, Historical Dictionary of the Dominican Republic. Okay, so I used that book along with other sources such as Frank Moya Bones, okay, the Dominican Republic and National History. When it comes to studying on my history when it comes to the Dominican Republic, along with one I've been promoting a lot, General History of the Caribbean, the Long 19th Century by UNESCO, okay? Good source when it comes to learning about the history and the nationalist movement and all that stuff. So I want to talk about Antonio Batista and some of the points that he has. As Dominicans, we have to be more smart, logical, as you can already see, especially when it concerns American politics. It's very polarized, okay? And we have to use a more scientific approach when we are discussing or debating about issues that we have, and especially when it involves the Dominican Republic, okay? So historical factors are never fully explained, details are left out or vaguely understood, okay, on why the Anti Haitian sentiment exists in the first place, which the earliest can be concerning during the 22-year occupation, which originally, 1821, when we became independent from Spain the first time. The second time was 1865. There was a discussion. Some wanted to align with the Grand Columbia, and they eventually sided with Haiti because they thought at the time it was a good economic choice when it comes to protecting their interest in remaining independent. Okay? And the issues that happened that led to the separation, I'm going to explain that later on in this segment. Okay? So there's a lack of education on the history on both sides. I already mentioned about the polarization of the politics. Okay? For example, Antonio Batista antagonizing African Americans is not a good look. One thing that we should be aware of, not all African Americans hold the same views, okay? And they actually fight the outdated information, racist rhetoric that was promoted during the early 19th century and early 20th century. For example, a brother named Chief X recommended a book called We Can't Go Home Again, an argument about Afrocentrism, and that's by Clarence E. Walker. Okay? So like I said again, as Hispanos abroad, we gotta be more informed because not all African Americans hold the same view. Okay? And just as they are focusing on their own community to be better, to be more informed, to be more enlightened, we should focus on doing the same. That doesn't mean to be passive, but that means to doing things the right way in a logical sense. So the misconceptions with African Americans on Dominicans can easily be resolved through education. As you already know, I talk a lot about Henry Maria de Hostos because he was a huge advocate of this, okay? And this can eliminate many issues. So what does Jose Marti, Henry Maria de Hostos, Ramon Emeterio Betances, and also Juan Pablo Duarte all have in common? They were all against annexation, and they were pro-self-government / political independence. They were inspired by the search for political freedom and improved social well-being of the population of the region. All three of them were of the opinion that the solution had to come from self-government and political independence. Okay? Betances, for example, someone that is considered the father of the Puerto Rican independence movement. His father was Dominican and his mother was Boricua. Okay, so he was half Puerto Rican and half Dominican, just like Joaquin Balaguer and Juan Bosch. Okay, and he was against racism of any sort. And even Juan Pablo Duarte was also against racial bias, okay? And we're gonna also get into the issue with his statue in downtown Manhattan in New York City, of his statue wanting to be removed. We're gonna get into that later. So let's get into some of Juan Pablo Duarte's political views. Take up arms without fear. Loyal Creoles, homeborn. March on, preserve, getting danger with scorn. Let us press on together to win our liberation from this false beast. He's referring to Spain. Stepfather of the Dominican nation, whether fair, black, or dun, copper skin, or mixed. March on bravely as one toward one goal, firmly fixed. Tyrants threaten our land. Save her now, lest she fall. Let the world know our band fights as one, brothers for all. Okay? So, there's an issue, Clara Ruiz, who was also Dominican, okay? She makes an argument of wanting the statue of Juan Pablo Duarte to be replaced by Mama Tingo, okay? Because with the assertion that Juan Pablo Duarte was a racist, okay? Which is completely untrue, okay? Juan Pablo Duarte, the father of the Dominican nation, okay, was the one that's influential when it came to separating from Haiti, okay? And we're going to review the reasons why in the second part of this segment, okay? So when it comes to Mama Tingo, we don't need to replace Juan Pablo Duarte with Mama Tingo. For example, we have the female version that I created of the Antillean Confederation banner, where we have all the women that represents our complex, diverse history. And we can use this as an example of giving a balanced representation of all of the historical figures that are important to our legacy as the Dominican people, okay? So this is the first part. We're going to get into the second part where I explain more stuff in context to this subject. So when we think about our heroes, one of the things that we have to take into consideration is how they view nationalism, okay? And for them, nationalism was defined as the right to self-government and preservation of political independence. They were all inspired by the search for political freedom and improved social well-being of the population. Okay? And now let's review the reasons for separation, okay, from Haiti. Two main reasons why the unification of the island was a failure. The first, Boyer failed to realize the route of continuing a forced plantation economy was a poor one. Many Haitian peasants refused to participate in any kind of forced labor due to the conditions they had already experienced under the French. Boyer lacked a plan that would be both agreeable for both the Haitian and the Dominican. The decision to pay France an indemnity further created complications and economic obstacles. Boyer failed to realize how different the people were on the Spanish side. One of the causes leading for the desire to separate from Haiti was many of the Dominicans were not happy about losing their properties, and the actions under Boyer led to protests regarding the island's unification. Okay. So one of the issues, on top of not agreeing with the decision to pay France the indemnity, okay, the government at the time failed to understand the land tenure, okay, in the Dominican Republic, okay, because at the time the eastern side was less populated than Haiti. So the land was owned by multiple people, so that created problems, okay? The occupation was perceived as being militaristic. Dominican campesinos were against policies of forced agricultural production, okay? So with the rural code, for example, Boyer it was a policy that he attempted to use to increase export production. And this increased export production was supposed to help raise the money needed to pay the indemnity to France so they can have their independence recognized, okay? And the reason for this was Boyer thought this was the best approach in protecting against a French invasion, okay? So Frank Boyer Bones, he writes, during this period, cutting of mahogany in the south, planting in the north, and cattle raising in the east proved to be more profitable. After Boyer's overthrow, the Haitian provisional government declared bankruptcy and had refused to make annual payments to France. All this led to further validations of separating from Haiti. This included a tax that was imposed with the intentions to help raise the money needed. I mentioned that already, okay? And then the other problem was the currency devaluation, okay? As they made money to help, as they created paper money to help pay the indemnity, okay, that devaluated the currency, and the island quickly fell into debt, okay? So as I mentioned already, the Manifesto of January 16th, 1844, it explains the discrepancies and it gives the reason why they decided to separate from Haiti. Okay. So now mentioning Haiti's current social and economic problems. Okay, and they are mainly due to the following: one, lack of state building. Two, corruption. As we can see, there's examples of corruption on both sides, okay? But it's more widespread on the western side of the island, which you can learn in a report called Haiti, A Political and Economy Analysis, which you can click on the link down below and read and learn for yourself and why these problems exist. Okay? 3, chronic poverty. 4, mismanagement of foreign aid and loans. 5, weak law enforcement. And 6, environmental factors, okay? So all of these issues exist because they go as early when Haiti was a colony under France, okay? During that time, okay, Saint Domingue was a lucrative economy, and that was mainly due to plantation slavery, okay? The French imported Africans on a massive scale, okay, which they had a high mortality rate, right? And this is mentioned by Michael R. Hall in this book, okay? This is a very good source, along with this book, okay? And I show these because it's important that we understand the history of both sides to understand the current problems that exist today, okay? And now we're going to wrap this up with the third part. So when it comes to Antonio Batista, there's a lot of issues. Number one, okay, he asserts that we're not multiracial. We are, okay? What separates Dominicans from Haitians? Haitians predominantly have sub-Saharan African ancestry with minimal European. While for us Dominicans, okay, we have that North African ancestry, along with sub-Saharan African, European, and the Native American, okay? That's what differentiates us, okay? The other thing is, Antonio Batista promotes a lot of extremism, and it brings forth a lot of issues and conflicts. The main issue for me is people will not really understand the problems that exist today on the island. When they look at the problem that exists today between Haiti and the Dominican Republic, they look at it in comparison to black versus white issues, okay? Which that's not the case, it goes much deeper than that. And unless you understand the history of both sides, that's how most people are going to vaguely look at the situation. So it's important that we be informed, okay? So once again, if you want to learn more about what I discuss in this segment, you can look into the references down below and check them out for yourself, which expands further beyond what I discuss here. Keep an open mind, and until the next discussion.